Ben Pickett. Lovely to meet you. We hooked up on kind of LinkedIn, and I was fascinated by your AI newsletter. Even more fascinated when I learned your background, and I won't steal your thunder, but you're now Chief Operating Officer at a company called SWA, and it looks like you kind of were a group of ex-Nike people who went and set that up. So that's really interesting. But yeah, your newsletter is absolutely brilliant. But Ben, do a little intro, please, and we'll get into the first topic today. You've got to stay on and listen to the first topic about KPMG's most recent report, shall we say, that is no longer available. But Ben, good to meet you, my friend. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Good to meet you as well. I'm Ben, as you said, and I sell AI for a living. And as you said, is an AI startup. And but for me, I write this newsletter about what most companies are bad at, which is buying it and implementing it. And the big thing there is this has become a really big passion project for me. I didn't start the newsletter as a way to reach customers. It was, I wanted to write for a long time, wasn't able to just because of previous roles and things of that nature. And this was a way that I could get out there and share what I know and share what I've learned, and then learn with the community as well. That's the big thing. The biggest thing that I've found is that while I write and I do the research and I dive into these different topics, the big part is learning from others, meeting others. And the end result of that is you end up with connections like you and others who come into your sphere, your network, and then we learn from each other and we help each other out, help companies adopt AI, help companies, with their technology, just help people in general with their, sometimes people are working on their careers or things of that nature, and they just want a little bit of advice and things of that nature. So it's been a wild ride. I never, ever expected it to take off like it has. I've been not doing this newsletter for that long. This last week was my 10th newsletter. And oddly enough, it just took off. And I say oddly enough because I expected that within my network that I would get, a few hundred views here and there, and that friends and family and colleagues would read what I wrote. I never thought that it would get in front of 70,000+ people, but that didn't register to me. So when that happened, I was like, oh, I wasn't quite ready for that, but that's okay. So I pivoted a little bit and I was like, okay, what do I need to do? One, to take advantage of that for all the things, help other people out, and then manage that traffic, if you will. And the biggest thing that it provided for me out of the gate is as an outlet for me to have those conversations, to get the ideas out there. And a lot of times I've had these thoughts about these Gen AI articles that are coming through, or technology articles that are coming through, that we see every day. And I was like, man, if they would just, and not saying I have all the answers, but there's little things that you can do. And my time at a previous Fortune 100 company for a number of years that probably know, a large retailer out there, I learned a lot, I guess you could say, about all of the, that global reach and how to connect with people and how to talk to people and all those things that went along with that. And so I put all that passion and knowledge and things that I've learned, my background, I've done public service, I was a mayor, those type of things, into the newsletter and into my thoughts. And so I've really enjoyed that process. It's been a really fulfilling project, I guess you could say. And this last week, the KPMG story that I wrote about, and allegedly KPMG forgot to check its own work. They allegedly had 40 of the 45 references not be accurate. And so I wrote about it because they used AI, allegedly, to proof that and get it out there, and then they had to retract it. And there's a number of news stories about that. And I dove into that because it's not that KPMG itself had, this is a common problem, I guess you could say, which is as we're adopting AI, we're learning how to live with AI, and we're also learning how to put it into our workflows in such a way that it makes sense. And AI comes across as very confident. And so, and the work that it puts out looks really good. So you get this wonderful looking document that comes through and it looks fantastic. And you might be the reviewer reviewing that. And everything looks great. And you're like, you're in a hurry because, there's deadlines and you got to do that. Looks great. Okay, great. Off it goes. Not having those checks in place and the human part in the AI world to check things, check your links, make sure, check with another AI and use multiple AIs to check for your work as well. And all those things can help prevent something like that happening with the company. And as we adopt AI, it's not just in documents that we put out or releases, but also with software engineers and code. The amount of code that software engineers are required to put out is immense now. But there's an expectation that, oh, you have AI, so you must be able to put out a whole, 10x what you had before. Same thing with the work that we're doing. We're expected to, we have a lot of productivity to go out, that has to go out. And what ends up happening is you feel rushed, and also there's not that downtime to kind of think about what you're doing, sit back and be like, okay, that intuition that you have doesn't have time to kind of settle in and be like, I probably should check that. Oh, you know what? I forgot to check those links. I need to go back and check those links because the time is so compact. And then you have 9 other things you have to go after and get out as well. So in this new world, we need to adapt our workflows. And there's a lot of discussion in the comment section in this week's newsletter. Lots of great ideas. A lot of them are very thoughtful and defined, and ideas I even think of is that we have the ability to rework from beginning to end the workflows of which we get our work out using AI. But when we just bolt on AI, often you end up with these kind of results. That bolt on with existing workflows without actually looking at your workflows leaves these holes often that we don't think about. So as a practitioner and an operator and somebody who is working with it every day, I use it all the time in my daily work and everything I do. There has to be those checks and balances along the way as you move things out. So
yeah, I was just kind of letting you speak there, Ben, not interrupting you, because everything that you're saying, I'm mentally going, yeah, tick, tick. And when I saw your newsletter, the most recent one about the KPMG retraction of that report that they put out, well, that's where I learned that from you. And it's almost just like every time you have a conversation with another professional about AI, you tend to come away from that having just learned something that you did not know before. And that happens to me like multiple times a day. But yeah, I mean, having 40 kind of sources, 45 sources at the bottom of your report, and 40 of them were effectively hallucinations at best. When you're an organization like KPMG, just shows you that we need to be tread a little bit carefully here. And I started this podcast for exactly the same reason as you're doing your newsletter, which I'd always thought about it. And I thought, well, I need to learn. And so I thought, I never even envisaged I'd have guests coming onto my podcast. I thought I'll just put out what I'm researching about AI and how AI was in the early days being adopted by enterprise. I was using ChatGPT at the time. That was pretty much the only one we had. And that was giving me all these different stories of AI adoption. and it just made up so many of them to the point where I was like, you couldn't even validate it. So I had to completely change my approach. But that was then. This is now. So what happened around that? Let's just put a bow on the KPMG report from your. You've been studied it. I saw you had all of your sources cited on your newsletter. But what happened and what went wrong with KPMG's? Sorry, not newsletter. There, I don't even know. Was it like a thought leadership piece?
They had a flagship report, and they also had allegedly 4 institutions in there that they made claims about. Just your usual piece that highlights the great things that they do and what they're doing with their other companies and customers and things of that nature. And allegedly even some of the information that was in that report on their customers was also fiction as well. So not only did they get not only did they get the references wrong that they attributed to, but they also had content within there that was also not wrong. That was also wrong as well. And for a piece that you're using to send out to customers or prospective customers, and also investors and things of that nature, everybody sees this type of pieces about, hey, this is what we're doing, and this is the great work we're doing. That's painful. And KPMG allegedly did say that, they expect their people to check their work, and that's very valid. You expect people to check their work. But at the end of the day, that's not an AI problem, and it's not necessarily a people problem. It comes back to being a process problem. What are the gates to get those articles out or those pieces out? What are the gates to get your code out to make sure that you got a human in the loop that is checking the work? And then you also, AI-assisted checks are great, but you don't want to go with just one LLM. You want to actually have multiple. And those are the things that I build into what I build every day, making sure that you have those cross checks so you're not just relying on one source. Also, you get a better result. AI is getting better every day. We have new models coming out all the time. So this is improving, but AI is built to give you things confidently. And it also, when you ask for something, it wants that very human, we want to please you type thing. Yeah, it wants to tell you, wants to give you what you're asking for. So a lot of times that bias is what's coming back to you. It's much like in the advertising world where you as an individual consumer, you get all of this advertising coming at you, and it's very, myopic and just to what you like and do. So your worldview gets, you think it's very broad, but it gets very constrained into just, this little pipeline of what you care about, and it keeps giving you more of those things. So then it reinforces that. So the same thing can happen with the LLMs, where it reinforces your bias and things of that nature. It has context about what you like, so it'll include those into what you're doing. So you just got to be careful in that respect. Check your work, have somebody else check your work, and then also have those process checks, automated process checks, and then the human that takes a look and sits down and goes, that doesn't seem quite right. Eddie, check all the links. Every link, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, and that needs to happen early in the workflow, doesn't it?
Oh yes.
Is let's check this first before we go further. And you find that when I'm vibe coding, for example, you soon learn when you just get dragged off down a path that you didn't validate, and then you hit roadblocks down the line, and you're like, why didn't you? Why? And you're blaming the AI tool. Go, why didn't you know about this? And so I got to use, when I use Lovable, for example, I'm on Lovable, I'm on Claude, I'm on Grok, and sometimes I'm validating all 3 sources of information, because Grok's kind of helpful because I know Lovable's based on Claude. I'm using Claude Cowork, for example, but I know Grok's completely independent of those 2. So it's a good check and balance. But just having that check early in the workflow, and Thomas Onan Wald, who was on the podcast last week, he's been on a number of times. He talks about, you know, the importance of remembering that AI, you know, there's deterministic and non-deterministic. And so understanding how these models work, which is what you're explaining, and their kind of predilection to bias towards giving you what you want and saying that you're right, you've got to check that. And when I did my this was in the early days of ChatGPT, I kind of did like I was doing some business planning, and ChatGPT was just being so agreeable. And I said to it, I said, look, imagine you're Elon Musk and he saw my business plan, what would he say? And I know it's not passing an Elon test, right? And ChatGPT came back and said one line, very interesting. It said, and it was a very interesting line to me. And then one line was, oh, you want some tough love, do you? And I was like, yes, I do. And then it got into giving me a non-agreeable answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about that is these are all great tools. There are methods though that you can adopt. One is think about creating personas, adversarial personas. So personas that help you check your work as who's your audience. Okay. Create personas that represent your audience. So if you're doing a newsletter like I am, I create personas to check my work, where, you know, and have a cross section of the people who read my newsletter and be like, take a look at my newsletter that I spent all my time writing and give me some feedback. And then I go back and I adjust against that. And that helps, one, to make sure that what I'm writing is clear. So there's a quality improvement over that. Two, I check all my links. I definitely I check all my links manually, 100%. But at the same time, it can be like, you know, you can really dive into those references. Are they good references? Because sometimes, even if you go and check the article looks good, the article that you're using to reference may actually be hallucinated as well, because we're in this age where you really need to dig into those references. And for things that matter, you also got to weight things. You're not going to necessarily be able to check everything all the time, but what are the things that matter if they get out that are going to impact you and your company and your reputation? Those things should be hard stops and hard checks in that process. Doesn't have to be everything. You can really leverage the tools that are out there to check your work, but definitely have those hard checks for the things that matter. So like when allegedly at KPMG has this happen, you're able to catch it before it gets out the door, because you have the person signing off on it and says, I am staking my personal reputation and my position on the fact that this thing is good. Just like editors do today in big publications, they check that work and make sure that it represents the company, the culture of their publication, and then also just their overall, what they're trying to say out in the world, and that it doesn't conflict with the things that they're, you know, their mission, vision statement of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and look, Ben, I totally respect your work in being diligent in doing that, because as you say, it's so easy to go see a news article that is deliberately biased as well, because of the publication, their leanings, where their funding comes from, and I know how much work it is to do what you're doing. Look, should we pivot back? I'm really interested in what you guys are doing today. You were, I don't think I'm talking out of school when I say you're ex-Nike, and I'm guessing that's where, with that, I think you were 10 years there. Without sort of going into what they were doing around AI, what was your kind of like first experiences of generative AI? Because I'm guessing that must have been when you were working there, and then you've moved out of the sort of the big, huge, giant corporate to set up what you guys are doing. What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, I started out at Nike in 2013 as a contractor, and funny enough, it became a very successful opportunity that then led to a position, and they asked me what I wanted to do. So in that moment, of the things that were available, I was tackling I was a data guy. My roots are very data oriented. And so I was brought in to help with performance and Nike.com and their backend databases and things of that nature. And so when I took the position, I was like, I want to tackle like test data management and, service socialization and the CI/CD pipeline to production. So that's where I got my start. And you might see some things of that in some of the things I'm doing. And then as I moved through my career at Nike, usually it was something I'd solve a problem and then I'd end up, they'd be like, okay, hey. So I helped with a very large project, and that was a very successful project. And so I ended up with my next role, and that kept happening. And I got known for taking on large, global projects and implementing them. And so then, long story short, I ended up as a global director of site reliability engineering at Nike, covering a number of different areas. And that was a really good fit for me. I had a very great experience working, across retail, the .com, infrastructure, global infrastructure, and then, supply chain and also, the wholesale piece. And that was a very fulfilling position. And as I was in that position, I think about 3 years or 2.5 years back, GenAI was everybody was like, okay, what do we do? This is a new tool. Organizations were seeing their end users using ChatGPT to help them with the daily work, and there was no framework for managing that, and there was no idea on how to adopt it within the organization. So one day and it's perfectly okay to share, one day I was talking to one of our senior VPs and I just gave him the whole, like, here's what we need to do with GenAI. And he's like, okay, great. Why don't you build a strategy for us and for our division? And I was like,
yeah. Off you go, then.
Yeah. So I proceeded to do that. I built out a strategy and learned a lot, did some pilots, got some early wins and things of that nature, also took on automation for the division. And that grew and grew and grew and came into this kind of cross-organizational strategy, if you will. And then I really fell in love with the possibilities that AI brings to us and can give us, all of us in our daily work. And I'm not so much of there's very much you hear, oh, nobody will have to work anymore to things. Any paradigm shift that we have out there has never resulted in a long-term job loss. And I don't think, and I know I'm probably one of the few, I don't think GenAI is any different. Yes, initially there's job losses. Yes, initially there is disruption. But overall, on the long term, new jobs, different jobs, and more jobs. And if you look at what's actually happening with the developers who are using GenAI, with the people who are using GenAI in the daily work, they're busier than ever. Because, and I think NVIDIA, don't quote me on this, and I say that, I think NVIDIA's CEO was talking about how they're seeing more code than ever being created by some of their engineers, and that they have this expectation that some of their engineers should be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on spend, and they would expect that from their top engineers because they're doing more with AI and assisted in what they're doing. But at some point, the human factor comes in where you're going to need more of that because it's so easy to get the code, because it's so easy to get the things through AI, the demand increases. So over time, that demand, because businesses now can get access to code at a faster pace, they don't have to wait months. There's more demand, so demand increases, and then that's how I see that, boomeranging back around. You see with more positions, because as companies can more easily, cheaper will the things that they need, there's more demand, which those positions come back in a different way in a lot of ways. But I do see that will be a net increase in jobs over time. It may take a little while, but I think we'll get there.
Yeah, so I'm an optimist on that front as well. And problem is the speed of this thing. Like, there's lots of comparisons to industrial revolution, and which saw a huge amount of automation and the rise of factories, and that was going to be the huge impact on job and create lots of job losses. Did the exact opposite, just grew everybody's economies massively, and actually just vastly increased the number of jobs available. But that took some time. Generative AI, it's just like, every month it just seems to be accelerating. So I think that's the challenge. And then the doomer talk kind of was started by the big players. So the Darios and Sams and Elons of this world have been talking the doomer language, and they kind of go first with the doomer part, and then they started tagging on, oh, but don't worry, because it's going to create a whole bunch of jobs that just don't even exist today that you'll be able to do. And now they've flipped on it and said, no, it's not going to take people's jobs. It's all going to be great. And that's kind of come a little bit late, given we're all animals, very sensitive to any risks to us. We're going to look on the possible downsides of new technologies, aren't we? Why would we do anything else? So I think you're right, but what's your view on how fast that change happens, and people go from, oh, I now realize that my job is not going to be done by the AI in the future, but the AI has created all these new job openings for me. How does that actually work in practice?
Yeah, and I think if you go back to, I wrote about this, the companies who are doing AI adoption there's not a lot of them out there that do well. If you look at that 95% number, 95% of companies aren't getting it right, and 5% are. And when you look at it from that lens, you're like, AI is everywhere, and we're all using it, whether we realize it or not, and just about everything that we do. But if companies are struggling to adopt, even though AI is moving at this very fast pace, how long is it going to take those companies to catch up? And maybe that's the slowdown piece that reframes, that gives people time to catch up. And I do think people need to think about that in their own roles. How can you use AI today? How can I do better prompts? What can I do from an individual to set myself apart in the roles that I'm doing? Or maybe even, you realize that your role is, that role is probably not going to be needed. So what is that similar role or that passion thing that you really want to go after that you can leverage and dive into? Assisted by AI, I would say, because to differentiate you have to incorporate AI. And I know that out there in the world, there's some resistance to that, and it's completely understandable. It's a huge change, like you said. And it's happening fast, like you said as well, that we have new models coming out, new capabilities, new announcements, sometimes on a daily basis. Sometimes, I think there was one weekend where we had 9 different announcements over the weekend of new things that came out that were major. And it's like, you almost get news whiplash. You're like, whoo, that's a lot to absorb, because you have full-on capabilities of things that you can use in your daily work potentially that are brand new that you have to learn. So I think the best approach is take small steps, focus on the things that helped you the best, learn, be a sponge, learn as things come out, focus on the things that are relevant to you, and try to cut out the noise, because there is a lot of noise as well. And that'll help people a lot, especially as I'm helping organizations adopt AI. I'm helping them, on my daily, and it is a struggle, even at the organizational level, because often you have the CEO, the COO, the CTO who have this expectation from potentially Wall Street or their investors that says, you need to adopt AI because we want this efficiency. But then you have people on the other end of that, the end user, who are saying, you know what, it takes me twice as long to use ChatGPT to do X when I can just do it myself and be done with it. And that's a real thing that happens. And a lot of that is not the organization and the individual as well, not having the resources to get the training. And sure, you can prompt and self-train all you want, but there are tips and tricks and methodologies that you can use that give you a lot better experience as you're using the AI. And there are also tools out there that make it a lot easier too. Context switching is one of those things that you have to do more of using AI. So sometimes, like you said, those different screens, you have Grok, ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, and you're going through those. And those are some of the things that I'm tackling, is how do you get that in one place where I work today? And that's more of a passion thing, because I don't want to switch between different screens. I want to be able to work where I'm working and ask the questions, and then cross-check with all those LLMs at just one prompt, because then that way there's less worry. And then how do I incorporate that in my daily? How can it help me with following up on leads, help me with my sales funnel? How can that help me grow those relationships that I have out there and make the best of this whole new world, if you will?
Yeah. I think, again, lots of good points, lots of good advice there as well. The point you made first resonated, which is for the doomer, the kind of doomer perspective on this, and the reality of how fast AI could actually automate out a human. I haven't seen it yet. I've seen what I would class as AI washing with companies who kind of were too big anyway, especially the ones that got big during COVID and needed to be right-sized. And they say, well, we're using AI. We didn't have the wrong size company. This is, I think there's a lot of AI washing going on. So I think people should be really cognizant of that. I am yet to see, and I'm yet to see a job role completely eliminated by AI. And I think your just kind of like approach is the right one, which is if everybody just picks up one of these tools and goes, right, how can I actually use this in my day job to kind of take the mundane stuff away, do some heavy lifting for me, make me more effective. And then I keep kind of the human touch and the domain experience, but within the context of our business operations. And you know how clunky these old companies are and siloed around their business operations. That requires people to really understand the business. They need to be there and involved in any AI project as well. So yeah, I'm with you, Ben. I just can't see this like, oh, we all wake up in January and everyone kind of says, oh, it's swept away. Every job that involved looking at a computer screen is now done by AI. I just don't think that's not realistic. And I don't actually think that is what is going to happen either.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. A lot of what you talked about also in that the AI washing, a lot of that is not necessarily the need to eliminate those roles. So that is part of it. But another part of that is companies are having to keep their margins and invest in AI. So they're downsizing the people that they have so they can pay for compute and GPUs and things of that nature, build out data centers and power and all the things that go along with that. But as those prices go cheaper, I think you'll see a little bit of boomerang from that too, where because I mean, that's a little predictive and I could be wrong, but right now there's a race on infrastructure and compute and resources that go into that, because these big AI companies are throwing everything they can at it. And it's also a resource thing too, which is, there's a number of metrics out there. We don't really have enough resources in the pipeline to meet the projected demands for AI. And unless we're good stewards with what we got, which means, you probably don't want to send your query to the strongest model out there to do a file move or to check the email or to even create an email. You don't want to use it for that.
That's right.
You want to
Yeah.
use Grok Fast or one of the
Something cheap,
cheaper models,
open source if you can.
open source, any of the LLMs or long models, the open source, real cheap models that do it well. You know, your pennies versus dollars, right? And also on
Yeah.
a compute side, you're saving compute. One of the newsletters I did on Uber that did pretty well as well, which their Uber CEO allegedly came out and said, "Hey, we spent all of our AI spend within like the first 3 or 4 months, and they didn't really have any uplift in consumer-facing spend or things that were material there that he could see for the spend that they made." And a lot of that is because they're, if you just throw resources at AI and you don't think about that implementation and the stewardship as you go, you're going to end up spending tons of money and not get the result necessarily that you want. Whereas when you take a proactive approach and you're like, okay, as I go through my day and as I'm building this out for my company, how can I make sure that the right model is the best model for the better price, not necessarily the cheapest price, but the better price, gets me to my end result faster, so that that spend is much easier for a company to absorb, if you will, and also they get a lot more benefit from it. And the one I wrote about, the Walmart blueprint, which actually did very well, over I think 71,000 impressions on LinkedIn, which just blew my mind, was just about how Walmart took a thoughtful approach and they actually implemented AI in a thoughtful way, using agents and then super agents, and then also cordon them off by different areas, and it actually increased their correlationally increased their revenue in some areas, I think by close to 30%. And so they ended up seeing that whole end-to-end result because they took a thoughtful approach, and I think it took them like 2 years. And that's
Yeah.
newsletter.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's kind of have in my newsletter. I talk about those interesting topics of how people, where people go wrong, so we can learn from that. And then also I try to find things where, hey, you know what, this company seemed to get it right, and maybe we can all learn from that as well. Because as we are trying to help our customers and we're trying to help our companies and organizations do better with AI and go faster, because we all have to be competitive because all the other companies out there are adopting as well. We have this opportunity to be thoughtful and also keep our costs down, and also help ourselves and our customers and that whole pipeline from end to end be better overall. And I think that's something that is more human, I guess you could say, than just throwing AI at it, because there's people in that process. They have to be there.
Yeah.
And to get it right, you still need the people to get it right. You can't just say, hey, yeah, go out there, solve everything, because it's just, you're going to end up with chaos and a lot of money out the door.
Yeah. And we're already seeing the first headlines of companies saying, absolutely, this AI thing's a little bit expensive, isn't it? Are we doing better with just the human resource in some of these processes? So, yeah, those realities I think we're going to see more and more of those realities. And I think we need to get OpenAI and Anthropic through their IPOs and out the other side. And then, and this will be another podcast episode where I then see that battleground is going to be, you've got those giant companies that need revenue, they need power, they need compute. And you've got a bunch of free of charge Chinese models that are really, really great, do a great job, but don't require all of that expenditure, but they're more difficult for an enterprise to use. So I think we need to get those IPOs done, and then I think some commercial realities are then going to set in for those companies themselves, and also for enterprises who are consuming AI. But look, that was a really fascinating conversation, Ben. I know we've hit time. where do people find you? Where do they sign up for your newsletter, please? And whatever you mention, I'll drop the links down here in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'll send you that as well. And then I also have a website, benpickett.com. You can check me out. And then the company I work for, my daily is swa-ai.com, where we help people and help people adopt AI in the places that they work. And one more thing, if you're interested in how, what works, things of that nature, reach out. You can DM me. I'm happy to respond. I usually respond if I'm super busy. It may take me a few days, but I'll get back to you. But happy to engage with people as well. And then the biggest thing I would say, and I think the last thing I'd leave you with, whenever you're working with AI, always ask AI, what question am I not asking? Because that'll help you surface things that you're not thinking about and that the AI isn't really focusing on. And that's been really helpful to me as well, because that question tends to surface a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily think about as you're using it. But overall, this new age, if you will, isn't going away. It's exciting. It's in every part of our daily lives, whether we realize it or not. And it's a huge opportunity for all of us, whether we're in sales or whether we're in leadership, whether we're, doing our daily job, wherever we're at, it can help us in our roles and what we're doing. And I think the future is bright overall. Sure, there's some turmoil right now, but I think that'll even out over the coming years.
Yeah, I agree. Look, really positive note to end on there, Ben. And I look forward to reading your newsletters as they come out each week. And I'll drop all of those links below. And great having you on the podcast. You've been a brilliant guest. Thank you very much. I've learned a lot from you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me. You all have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Ben. Bye.